in the next meeting, just some notes.
Good idea. Okay.
Meeting, if there's anyone who wants to speak under privilege of the floor.
We have somebody, so yeah. And we're live? Okay. Hello, I would like to call to order the meeting of the Tompkins County Industrial Development Agency, but we do not have quorum. And we've had a short discussion on how we wish to proceed. It does not appear we will have quorum. And so we will not be able to open the meeting. However, we're all here. There's some items that we thought would bear discussion. We will leave the live stream on to allow that to occur. And we have some members of the public, I believe, who wish to address us. And since they've come here, we're happy to hear them. And we will pick up the business at our next meeting. With that said, we did have an agenda. So I'll generally, for purposes of the discussion, follow some of the agenda items. But first, I would proceed to comments from the public. And Teresa Alt, you had indicated you wish to address the members present.
Okay, is this on?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, okay. I am Teresa Alt, 206 Eddy Street, City of Ithaca. I see that the workforce housing policy has been modified, but only superficially, not to the extent needed. The required payment of $27,500 per lacking affordable unit, the payment to the Tompkins County Housing Fund, has been raised to reflect inflation, but it still fails to come anywhere near the cost of building a unit, which is estimated at $250,000 in a report to the Ithaca Urban Renewal Agency Committee. Yes, I know the Tompkins County Housing Fund doesn't build housing, but puts in a little token of support to attract big government and maybe private grants. But it is magic thinking to assume that those grants will always be there. Before doing any tax subsidies to housing, please find out what is needed. City jobs are not 80% high paying and 20% low paying, more like the opposite. But I have not seen professional statistics on city jobs. You could hire a consultant to get those statistics, or just concentrate on getting better paid jobs in this area. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who wishes to address the members present? Right. Okay. Well, I said I'd follow the agenda, but I'm going to truncate some of it. I don't think we have any additions. I hope not. We were going to discuss the Housing Committee recommendations. And Heather, maybe you want to just talk to those changes just a little bit and what the Housing Committee did.
Sure. So the Housing Committee did meet. They reviewed the existing policy. You have the minutes from that meeting in your agenda packet for informational purposes, and they did make some recommendations to update the policy, which you have in your agenda packet. And I can go through those. They did recommend changing the payment amount from $5,000 to $5,500 times the total number of units in the project. They wanted it to be clear that the timing of that payment needs to be disclosed on the application. So we did add language in there. And then there's another document in here that just highlights the changes that we're recommending for the application. That's on page 4 of your agenda packet. If this project is subject to a payment in lieu of providing affordable housing units on site per the workforce housing policy, when will the payment be made? At pilot closing or in equal installments over the first 3 years of operation, which is subject to a deferral fee of 20% of the payment amount due at closing. So it's clear in the application, everybody can see when that payment timing is coming. That was the change that was made last year to the policy, that if they wanted to defer the fee to the first 3 years of operations, they'd have to pay that deferral fee, recognizing that the Community Housing Development Fund would rather have those funds up front rather than in later years. And then the final set of recommended changes, there was discussion about if you had a parcel that a developer had purchased and they decided that their business is not affordable housing, they're a for-profit developer, they're developing at market rate, that if they were able to find an affordable housing developer that would develop on site, if they could subdivide that parcel and those affordable units could count towards their affordable contribution. There was discussion back and forth about the merits of this, and the committee decided to recommend that that would be allowed if the affordable housing developer were a not-for-profit affordable housing developer rather than a for-profit developer. So that was added. You'll see on page 3, the land for the affordable housing portion of the project is being conveyed by the principal investor to a not-for-profit affordable housing organization who will perform the development. If you skip back to page 2 at the bottom, we also added some language so that if you were building for-profit or market rate and affordable units on the same property or as part of the same approval, that they would be built concurrently or within a short time frame, one after the other, so that you wouldn't run into a situation where someone developed the market rate and 5 years down the road they hadn't done the affordable units yet. So that's some change in language there. And then if you go to page 5, our UTEP, our Uniform Tax Exemption Policy, on page 2 of that, page 6 of your agenda packet, we sort of memorialized in the policy the kinds of eligible projects that the IDA will deliver incentives to. We had never specifically mentioned 100% affordable housing projects, but our practice has been with every 100% affordable housing project that the IDA has delivered an incentive that is equal to 20% of projected net operating income. So we just sort of memorialized the practice of what we're doing as an eligible activity. So that would be affordable housing anywhere in the county that would be eligible for that kind of incentive. We have done that, Art House, where Paul Mazzarella Way is, it's escaping me, what's that one called, on the north side neighborhood?
We did it on Seneca Street.
210 Hancock.
That's right. 210, Seneca Street. We did on West Seneca.
Yeah, and that one, the one on Seneca Street was within our CTAP, but, just, so those were the recommended changes to the policy, to the application, and then to our UTEP from the Housing Committee.
I did have a question on page 2. It says the criteria in making such a determination shall include whether. I assume we're not locked into those. Those are the things we're supposed to be looking for, but we can adapt to circumstances.
Yes.
Okay. That was the discussion. Devin.
Yeah, I had a related question to that. It was clear from the minutes of the committee meeting that the addition of the little subsection 5 that allowed the project to be, that portion of the project to be conveyed to a not-for-profit, it was clear that that was one of the factors that could be considered. But I was a little put off by the way it says the criteria in making such a determination shall include weather. And then you list them and it says and. And for people who wouldn't have the benefit of the minutes, the committee meeting minutes, I was wondering if there was some little tweak we could make to that so it would be clear that no single one of those is a sine qua non. You know, like maybe we could just say the criteria in making such a determination shall include some one or more of the following, whatever, just so that it's clear that you're not required to assign it to a not-for-profit to do the affordable housing piece. I mean, maybe I'm just being overly picky, but I just want to make sure that nobody thinks that they have to do this.
Yeah, that was sort of my question, too.
Yeah.
You could read this as, okay, here's, hit the buttons, and I don't think that was what was intended. And for the benefit of you, Deborah and Duxon, before you were on the IDA, we had an extensive discussion about the Carpenter Business Park project, and this is where this is really coming from, in that there were 3 development projects really on the same parcel, one of them being an affordable housing, one market rate, and then the medical facility. And there's some commercial mixed in there too. And they used the affordable housing component to meet the requirement for all 3 buildings. And we went back and forth saying, well, they're 3 separate projects. That's fine by itself, but it doesn't do anything for the other 2. And we eventually came to the conclusion that no, there's enough units in the affordable that they should get the benefit of it, that they're really getting their 20% across all of it. But it was a long, drawn-out discussion, and this is trying to make sense of that, just so maybe you already knew that.
So I have another question, and Doc may know this, but I don't. There's reference in your committee minutes to the 1/2 581 project, or 1/2 581A pilot model. Can somebody enlighten me?
Yes, I can. So under real property tax law, if you're an affordable housing project, you're income qualifying, you're certifying, you know, you're 80% of median or under, you as of right can pay property taxes under real property tax law 581A, which is 12% of net operating income. So you show the assessment department every year your net operating income, your property tax payment is 12% of that. So what we do is, and it's that recommended change to the UTEP that says for affordable housing projects, we will deliver and we will use that same net operating income as 581A. However, we'll give you 20% instead of 12%, or maybe the numbers are opposite. I tend to mix things up, but it's a little bit better payment, or more of a payment savings, because what we found is in Tompkins County, even with 581A, the property taxes were still killing some of the affordable housing projects.
Okay. I figured it was something like that, but
Yeah.
okay, thank you.
And now that I mentioned Carpenter Business Park, I see that their affordable housing building is almost done. Do you have any sense when that's going to open?
Soon.
Thank you.
Well, that clears it right up.
Depend on it.
Well, and I just wanted to add to the, the Carpenter Park project that, part of the discussion really there was that they subdivided and there were separate entities. When you do a tax credit project, you have to subdivide. You have to have a separate LLC in order to take the tax credit financing. So you have to do it to do an affordable project. But there was some concerns from the IDA that because they were separate entities that were doing the market rate and the affordable, but there was a nexus. It's all being done by Park Grove Realty and Cuba Medical Center, and it was all approved as one planned development zone, that entire project. It was all approved and site plan approved at the same time.
And just some more history, and you probably both know this, but we really did want projects where 20% of the units would be affordable and 80% or less would be market rate in the same building. And it turns out it's almost impossible to build that, to finance it under the federal and state requirements, that the money for affordable housing is so structured and so differently structured to market rate financing that we just haven't had people coming before us saying we want to do it that way. So this housing policy generally, I think, is going to be used on pretty much any project that's market rate. More?
So those were their recommended. Maybe at the next meeting, we ask somebody to move it and move your recommended change.
And I won't be here. So I'll leave it to Rich or Duck to take care of that for me.
Okay. And specifically, how do we want to do that? You're concerned about the word "and" there. We want to make sure that these are considered, but they're not required.
Yeah, so the easiest way to do it would be just that introductory sentence. The criteria in making such a determination shall include one or more of the following. And yeah.
One or more. Yeah, okay. Okay. And Heather, while we're having our conversation, the 5,500 and the 27,500, was that an adjustment for inflation, or what was the rationale for that incremental change?
Yeah, just sort of recognizing that the cost of construction has gone up, likely the cost of development for affordable units has gone up a little bit.
And was there any discussion regarding the issue raised by our commenter earlier that these numbers are just out of the ballpark too low?
There was discussion. I don't know if anyone else, if Duxon wants to speak to some of that discussion at the committee meeting. My recollection is, it's sort of a delicate balance between, projects are coming here because there is some financial need. So at what point do you tip the scale where there's so much financial need and they're not getting enough benefit, the payment is too high, that projects are not happening? I don't think the intent was ever to locally fund 100% of affordable housing unit development. The Community Housing Development Fund has a very good track record. The Low-Income Housing Tax Credit Project, tax credit allocations have been around for decades. They're likely not going to dry up, and that's really how affordable housing is funded. So to be able to leverage some of that local funding to build an affordable unit was sort of the intent, and so, continuing with that intent over time.
My understanding is we're going to see some significant payments into that fund this year.
Yes, the first payment was received. We closed on the GPA management, which is the 401 East State Street renovation of the existing building for residential units. So first payment, I think it was $230,000. I know walked over a couple of weeks ago.
Oh, outstanding. Okay.
Annie's got her hand up. She's been patient.
Annie.
Thank you. Some of it Heather has just stated, but I just wanted to note that part of our discussion was around that this is not to, just speaking to the comments that were made, this is not made to totally pay for affordable units, the difference, in affordable units, but just like the Community Housing Development Fund, it doesn't pay. Those grants don't pay, the difference for it, but it helps and offset that. And also most of the organizations that are doing that are using that to leverage, various funds. So, I was happy with, the increase that there is. And there's part of it for me thinking is that I actually don't want to pressure some organizations, some developers into just doing affordable housing if that's not their thing. So there's a lot of or at least a couple of good organizations that do it here locally. And so if this helps them or helps developers that are generally already doing it and doing a good job, if we're assisting them, I feel good about it. Thank you.
Okay. Anything further on the Housing Committee policy changes? I think we've done that. Next on our agenda, we were going to talk about the fund balance and discuss use of the fund balance. Heather, do you have anything you wanted to say to open that?
I did, just since we've had some new members on the IDA, I sent a short memo. I did update our, as of the end of 2022, our our fund balance after commitments is about $1.5 million. I gave a little bit of background about our fund balance history and what the IDA can use fund balance for, recapped some of my recommendations that I had been asked to provide to the IDA regarding uses of fund balance, one of which was to set aside some funding to cushion in case of a recessionary period to support economic development services, which are done through an MOU with IAED. I had made a recommendation to support wayfinding signage in conjunction with the conference center project, which the IDA did approve $100,000 through contractual services to support that project last fall. The IDA did decline to support a strategic plan for the airport. The county has funded that. And then my final recommendation was to support the planning, feasibility, and potentially equipping a portion of an innovation hub at the Southworks project. It's really envisioned as a new graduation space for technology companies as they grow out of area incubators, a move to try and keep them located here. There had been a little bit of discussion about that. We have a team of stakeholders and partners that are sort of moving forward with a phase 2 business survey and then a little bit more feasibility analysis around that. But I think there's significant opportunity to invest in shared co-location space so that some of these companies can grow here. Once you establish and start hiring employees, it becomes harder to relocate elsewhere. One of the other things that's really going on in terms of these venture-backed companies is since the beginning of venture capital investment, the investors wanted to be close to their companies, or they wanted the companies to be close to them. So we saw that they would move to Boston or Silicon Valley or even New York City or North Carolina, Atlanta, where some of these hubs of investors and companies are. Since COVID, that has completely just changed the way that investment companies are managing their investments, and location doesn't matter anymore. So we're seeing a lot more. We were seeing a lot before, but we're seeing a lot more investment from venture capital outside the state, outside the region, and companies are being able to stay here. So we really want to be able to capture them. I could talk about that forever because it's sort of a pet project. There was also discussion when I brought that up and that recommendation about supporting some of the construction trades workforce training programming that they're trying to incorporate at Southworks. So on an independent schedule, that is sort of moving forward. I would like to bring more information about both pieces at some point. We just haven't sort of been ready yet. I did include a current sort of proposal for some of the phases around the feasibility study about the tech hub. And then finally, I made a new recommendation, given all the Micron announcements and all the talk about business attraction, that, we need a site to be able to market it. And that site has to have infrastructure. It has to be shovel ready. do we want to talk about, how do we invest over time? It's a long-term investment in owning property and leveraging other state and federal funds to put in broadband, water and sewer, access to utilities, and all of that kind of thing. I mean, $1.5 million won't do that, but it might start to sort of position us to where we could actually attract companies to come here. So that was all in my memo that I've recapped, and I also did include the memorandum from Russ Gensel just about, legally what IDAs can and cannot fund to help to inform some of that discussion.
Okay. Deborah.
Yeah, and I want to start out by apologizing because I didn't get a lot of sleep last night. So this may not be the most coherent commentary. I appreciated your memo. I think that we need to face the fact that all of the things that you mentioned, having a reserve for hard times, funding the Southworks project, starting to move towards saving for a marketable site. They're all good things that we should be doing, but we can't afford to do them all. And my concern at the moment is where the economy is headed. This banking crisis may not turn into the kind of banking crisis that we had in 2008, but what's definitely happening is that credit is tightening significantly for a number of reasons. Depositors are fleeing banks in favor of money markets. They're fleeing smaller regional banks in favor of large, too big to fail banks. And banks are just generally, even the big ones, saddled with these long-term low-interest debt obligations that don't put them in a position to do a lot of lending. At the same time, commercial real estate's tanking. Apparently, there's a record number of commercial real estate loans that are going to be reaching maturity in the next 2 years at a time when interest rates are going to be high and banks aren't going to be willing to lend. All of that put together suggests to me that what we're headed into may be a period of time where we don't have a lot of developers who have access to the kind of financing that enables them to come to you with a project. So I think my first concern here is that we leave ourselves at least $1 million to get us through the next couple of years. And it may be that we won't need it for that, but that just seems to me to be a wise thing to do. What you want to do with the other $500,000, I guess your Southwards project is certainly worthy, but if you do that and we have to use a significant amount of reserves to get through the next couple of years, that doesn't set us up for having a long-term savings plan towards a marketable site. I'm sure none of this is welcome news, but that's just the way I see it.
Thank you. Yeah. Annie. Yep, Annie.
Thanks, Rich. I do like the idea of increasing the reserves. I'm not sure what the numbers would be, but I like the idea of looking at the reserves for the IDA, and also I like all the ideas, but this is what's speaking to me more right now. I'm thinking about water sewer issues. We have we know we need to improve housing, and we need to get people to support businesses. We need to get more people in here. So I'm wondering if we can do something with that, help with water and sewer for some projects. And I know, I don't know if he's still here, but I know Tom Knight, I think I saw him in the audience there, that, he had mentioned before about commercial kitchen in the city of Ithaca, and I'm just wondering if that is something that he's asking for support with, because that's something that would be sooner rather than later. And I know a lot of small businesses are struggling food, whether it's food processing or, producing food for local use. So just wondering if we can find out a little bit more of that, if we want to put that in our idea bucket. Thank you.
Okay. Duxon.
Yeah, related to those suggestions, I kind of had a broader question about, because I've also talked to Tom about the commercial kitchen, and it's been an idea that's been floating around for years, well before I was in a place to really influence whether it happens or not. But I'm curious, more broadly, how we vet or consider ideas for the fund balance, whether they just get recommended to us, or if there's a formal process or application process or something.
We have not had a formal process. We've been talking about it for some time. Heather, you had more to say on
Yeah,
that.
we've never had a fund balance like we have now, which, $1.5 million seems like a lot of money. Other IDAs are sitting on 13 or 16 million. But the IDA had asked me to make some recommendations, so I went through the county-wide economic development strategy, the recovery strategy, IAED, the Countywide Economic Development Agency's 5-year strategy, and looked at projects that were specifically called out there. When I do economic development work, a lot of what you look at is the long-term quality job opportunities and the potential for new tax base. So those were where some of those recommendations came from. IDAs are also pretty I shouldn't say strapped. They're heavily regulated by the state, and their ability to, they can't grant money, they can't loan money, they can enter into contractual services, they can pay for things that are tangential to a project for which the IDA has delivered an incentive. Real economic development purposes. So, knowing the constraints of what the IDA can and cannot do, and then the strategies and the plans that this community already has in place, I made, some recommendations.
I had a few different comments. I too like the idea of the commercial kitchen. I'd like to make sure that it's financially viable. And I'd like to find a way to see if there is a way we could invest in that. It does seem like there's some legal impediments. But one of the reasons I like it is that we tend to support large development projects. And those are the ones, say, that compared to a small development, it just isn't economically viable to come to the IDA and look for tax incentives. But something like the commercial kitchen would really be targeting startup businesses, small businesses, and giving them opportunity that they wouldn't have otherwise. Similar to that, there was another idea floating around for a CDL training site, which we used to have the ability to commercial driver's licenses to do them here in Tompkins County. And we've been seeking grant money to combine that up at our airport to have a CDL training facility, and we have not been successful in getting the grants. But we're seeing a real difficulty in finding drivers for TCAT and for the school buses, the schools for school buses, and for our public works departments, among other things. But a CDL facility would again be really allowing us to make an impact on the very small businesses and help individuals who want to be involved in the local market. So, Duxon, you mentioned, do we have a formal process? I'd like us to have something perhaps more structured so that we know kind of as a group how we're getting there. But I'd like it to include those elements that we're looking to the big projects, and I think we've done really well with those, but also to help much smaller ones. Finally, I've had some discussions with the Southworks developers and the people doing career pathways about trying to do a trades development program that would be utilizing the Southworks project on an ongoing basis for the electrical, plumbing, HVAC trades to do almost a continuous apprenticeship program for paid employment while the project is getting built out. And if there was some way we could help with that, I think that would be very exciting.
If I may, Rich, quickly?
Yes, please.
As Heather noted, there are limitations statutorily as to what IDAs are authorized to spend their money. With respect to the kitchen project, if that's something that the board desires to do, for lack of a better way of putting it, we can figure out a way that you can spend your money in a legal way. You can buy equipment, you would own it, run it back to them, that type of thing. So there are ways to get money out of the door to the extent it's at the board's pleasure.
Deborah.
Yeah, I was wondering about that as Rich was speaking, because your memo, which was very helpful, thank you, made it pretty clear that anything we did, it actually had to be related directly to something that we had already incentivized. But I was curious, you had included that last little kind of throwaway paragraph that said LDCs have more flexibility and can pretty much do whatever they wanted to. And I noticed in Heather's memorandum, she broke down the unrestricted net positions of the IDA versus the TCDC, and we do have, it appears, over $500,000 in unrestricted funds in the TCDC. So that might provide an avenue for funding the kind of small projects that the IDA just doesn't get to.
Yeah, certainly there's much more flexibility with the dollars in the LDC account versus the IDA account. You could do loans, you could do grants. It just becomes a business decision that the board has to make. And, the question was asked, do we have a formal policy? And I don't think we do. The question is, how do you have a formal policy? It's got to be based, in my opinion, it has to be based on facts.
The restrictions, yeah.
And what the project is and what the board's desire is to do with the money.
Well, and, in economic development, you generally fund things that are going to create the jobs and increase the tax base, and that drives your tax revenue up and your ability as a community to provide other quality of life improvements. While you want to fund everybody, you can't fund everybody. If you fund a manufacturer and they create 20 jobs, it creates the need for the dry cleaner and the gas station and, the captive to the local market, the caterer and the flower shop and all of that kind of thing. And that's sort of economic development theory. So when I make my recommendations, that's something that I look at. If this body wants to fund, a commercial kitchen whose, residents may, create half, manufacturing, food startup companies and half food trucks and, caterers and all that kind of thing. I think that's fine. It's certainly a worthy project, but I would recommend, just like any project that you're going to look at the IDA, that there be some third-party analysis of financial feasibility, particularly if it's a startup, that there has to be, some third party that comes in and says, yeah, this startup budget, this 5-year pro forma makes sense, and there is market for this. I mean, I think at the very least you would want that. $150,000 is a good chunk of change. I think that you would also want some assurance that all of the other startup costs have been secured, pending a lot of banks and our loan fund at IAED, pending all other sources of startup funding. And you have to have an entity with which to grant the funds to, if you're going to do that through the development corporation, or to end up or purchase the equipment and lease it to. So I think you want to think through that. I know there's been a feasibility study that was done by, the person that wants to run the kitchen. I think you should take a look at that, and I would highly recommend that, you have a third party. I would be happy to do it. I do it for the financial review for the bigger projects, but I don't want to be put in a position where it's me, arguing against somebody else's numbers in a very local project. I would suggest that the IDA have a third party do that.
Certainly, thank you. Certainly, I would want to be very comfortable that this had a good chance of success, and I think having a third-party review is a really good idea. Perhaps we could start out, I'd be quite willing to attend a meeting with you, Heather, and the proponents of this project, and just sort of outline how we could go forward so we'd have something to bring back to the IDA with an outline of next steps, and then we could look further at it. Okay. Does that make sense? Duxon, Deborah, Annie? Okay. More discussion about fund balance? I think everybody chipped in. Okay, well, I think we'll pick it up at our next meeting. We'll keep going on this. Next item that was on the agenda was the Paris reports. I don't know if we need a report on that today or.
They were emailed. They were very large files. They are up on our website. Everything that goes to Paris is on our website, including our financial report. I would just highlight that we had 59 projects last year that were under pilot or receiving some sort of sales tax mortgage recording tax incentive. And of those 59 projects, those that were paying property taxes paid $4 million in new property taxes and recorded having 2,265 jobs. So, I think by all accounts in 1 year, that's pretty good work for an IDA.
Yes. Okay.
And thank you to Ina for inputting all of that information in the system.
Yeah, Rich, unfortunately, we need board approval for authorizing the report and filing it.
We did that at the last meeting.
Okay.
We always do it in advance. They give authorization and approval.
Okay.
It's important to be lucky. We already did.
Yes.
Okay. I do not have a chair's report. Heather, do you have any staff report, anything you wanted to share with us?
I had previously reported that the GPA management project paid the first payment to the housing fund. So I think that's sort of exciting that payments are starting to flow. And
You said that's 230?
$230,000. The City Harbor project is teeing up for construction. This will be the first project under our new construction labor policy. My staff internally, we've had a couple of meetings with their general contractor and the development team going through all the bid lists, and there are going to be some waivers based on lack of bids, cost of bids. So in conjunction with our policy, I will be reporting as those waivers come in. If they're administratively approved, you will see them at meetings, and if there's any extenuating circumstances, those will need to be approved by the IDA. But the good news is that City Harbor is nearing groundbreaking.
Wow. I think that project is exciting for a few different reasons. One is the number of amenities, public amenities that would be included, such as the walkway that'll be extended right along the water, making our waterfront trail quite a bit bigger. The mini parks that are in there, but also because it's essentially creating a whole new neighborhood. That part of the city does not have housing. Once you get across Route 13, it's going to be brand new, and I anticipate that it may end up triggering some other things happening adjacent to it, say with the talk about moving TCAD and perhaps some of the city facilities, that this would turn into housing and where people live, which would be kind of exciting. Deborah, did you have something?
Is any of that affordable? Or is the affordable housing all within Carpenter Park?
Carpenter Park has the affordable housing unit in it. I believe City Harbor paid into the Community Housing Development Fund, or will.
City Harbor won't be paying into the Community Housing Development Fund because it was approved before the policy went into place.
Oh, my apologies.
Yep.
Okay. Okay. It got to the finish line before we instituted that requirement. Okay. So anything further? Is that your report?
It is.
I don't think we can approve any minutes. So I don't see any other business that we could discuss today.
Well,
Right. We can go off of the live stream, and the members who are present can get an update on an item that would have been discussed in executive session. It's potential or pending litigation. So I would ask for a motion to adjourn, but there is nothing to adjourn. So here we are. So I guess we can shut down.